radio for the masses.
Headline edition, July 8, 1947. The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc has been found and is now in the possession of the Army.
If the game is rigged, change the game. Game changer.
I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world.
This is Fade to Black with your host, Jimmy Church, on the Game Changer Radio Network.
All right. Welcome. Fade to Black. That's right. Today is Wednesday, February 19th, 2025. I am your host, Jimmy Church. Let's do this, man. Yeah, we're going to have one of those shows tonight for sure. Marc Hartzman is with us. More on that in just a bit, but you can help support everything that we do around here. Get yourself Fade to Black t-shirt. I just announced earlier this week, we've got two new designs coming out. We're getting ready to present those too as well. But just click on the links below. Help support what we do around here. An amazing week here on the show. Monday night, Jerry Sargent was here live in the studio. Last night, Lori Micah was with us. Love never dies. Tonight, of course, Marc Hartzman is here. Our bizarre world history, amongst other things. And then tomorrow night, Jared Murphy and Christy Bass are with us. RKEOX on Fade to Black. So there you go. I have 4 major events coming up. Rise of the Guardians, March 29th and 30th in Sedona, Arizona. Contact Modalities Expo in Delavan, Wisconsin. Contact in the Desert, Palm Springs, California. And then heading south to Peru again this year with Brian Forster. That's June 17th through the 27th. Links for everything that I am doing are below. Okay. All right. Yeah. Come and hang out with us. I do my best to get out there and not only around the country, but around the world and hanging out with all of you. So come out to some of the events and say hello. All right. All right. What was I going to say? You know what? It doesn't matter. That's the second time in the last half hour that I have spaced on what I wanted to say. Yeah. It's Wednesday. Let's go with that. All right. It's cold out here, man. Drinking some coffee. Marc Hartzman. Tonight, we get to jump into his world and our world. He's a historian, and he looks at the world kind of the way that I do. He looks at the bizarre. He looks at oddities. He looks at the unexplained. He looks at the weird. He looks at the stuff that this audience loves. And we're going to go through all of that tonight. He's got a new book out. And what the book is about is going to surprise you. It's pretty interesting. So we'll be doing that too as well. Of course, he's been on Coast to Coast with George Noory. He's been on all of the usual shows that deal with this stuff, which includes things like The Unexplained and so forth. So in addition to his books about UFOs and Mars and Oliver Cromwell's embalmed head, he talks about different things, messages from God and everything else. So we're going to do a little bit of everything tonight. One of our favorite guests is back with us, and I would like to welcome the one and only Marc Hartzman. Marc, welcome, by the way.
Thanks, Jimmy. Good to be back.
It's so good. It's so good to have you here. And it's true, though. I do this show for myself, right? I don't do it for you. I don't do it for the audience. No, I do it for me. And then the audience gets to engage, right? Via, if I bent or tried to, or conformed to advice, you wouldn't be on the show. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, you're doing what you love. And if you love it, other people will too.
Man, and that's why I'm just excited to have you back on the show with us, because I can just do my thing and discuss these as topics that I have been engaged in since I was a little kid. Now, before we get started, titling this show, right, Our Bizarre World History, and how strange and weird our world is. If you need any proof of that, at least for me, I just check my phone now every 15 minutes to see what bizarre part of the universe, you know, what alternate reality that we find ourselves in now. We
There's no
live on a
shortage.
strange planet, don't we?
It's yeah. There's yeah, no shortage of weirdness out there, which is great. It's all fascinating.
When back in the day, for the both of us, when we would discuss these topics, we would get labeled a certain way, right? And whatever it is, well, conspiracy theorist is too easy, but that's part of it. But we were considered strange. Now we're normal. How crazy, how nuts is that, right?
I still feel like when I'm at my regular day job, I work in advertising. And advertising as a creative person, we're supposed to be a little bit weird, and that's kind of where ideas come from. And you want to push things and make them odd and bizarre. But I still feel like when I start telling people too much about what I'm writing on the side with the books and in my site Weird Historian, at a certain point they're like, "What is it? What are you talking about? What is this guy
But it's
into?"
not that kind of party anymore, is it? Hey, can I get you to tilt your camera down just a little bit?
Yeah,
There
good.
you go. Much better. Much
Okay.
better. But yeah, it's not that kind of party anymore. You're free to talk about parallel worlds or time travel or UFOs or ghost,
Yeah,
whatever. It's certainly become mainstream.
yeah. The
And
stigma's going away for sure.
yeah.
All these things.
And now your new book, I'm going to tell everybody. Yeah, hold it up. Hold it up.
Sure. A little different than what we started talking about here, but yeah.
No. There's a method to my madness. Mark's new book is on sword swallowing, and we're going to discuss all of that in detail later on in the show. I want to just cap off what we're talking about right now. Oh, we'll get to all of that. We'll get
Yep.
to all of that.
It's lots of good stuff.
Is you have written about and talked about Mars and UFOs and everything else, and knowing where the mainstream media is today with the subject, if we back up to the turn of the century, Tesla, the New York Times, Marconi, and the possibility the canals on Mars and everything that was going on back then, it was a fascination that grabbed hold of the world, and the interest of contact and what is possibly out there, that's always been there, hasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I love all those turn of century stories about Mars and the real firm belief that there was intelligent life. Like you said, Tesla and Marconi were two huge names, right? I mean, those are two of the most brilliant people on the planet. Both firmly believe they've been contacted by intelligent Martians. And then there were a whole host of other respected scientists in that same time period that were exploring different ways to contact Martians or to receive the communications that they were sure that Martians were sending us, because they all believed that they were more intelligent than us, more advanced than us, because their evolution began earlier than Earth's evolution.
Right.
So yeah, and even before that, there was hundreds of years prior to that, there was belief in life on all the planets in the solar system. It was actually pretty common that was just the way it was.
Even the Greek philosophers contemplated this subject,
Yeah. Yeah.
and so is it because of the way that the human mind works, right? You could be Stone Age man standing out in the savannah, at night looking up at the stars, and I often wonder, did that thought pop in their head? Is there anything else out there before the concept of what a star is or what space is, but wondering, and has that always been there, right? Who are we? Where do we go after we die?
Yeah.
And are we all that there is?
It's the
It
age
seems
old
like,
questions.
yeah, the three fundamentals, right?
Yep. Yeah, I imagine it's just how do you not wonder those things, right? Just looking up and wondering what else could be out there. It just does. It seems innate to our nature. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and the other side for me is I love looking at the stars. I have telescopes, and I live in the desert. It's great,
Yeah.
and but I even with my understanding of what's going on in the sky at night, and I'm not a PhD or anything, but I certainly have a pretty firm grasp on it. But I cannot, for the life of me, understand how somebody without technology could eventually determine the difference between Jupiter and a star, right? A
Yeah.
planet and a star.
It is
How,
amazing.
yeah. How long are you staring?
Yeah. Mapping the sky,
Yeah.
watching
Yeah.
the rotate. Yeah, I know. It's incredible.
Mars. Mars is a bit different because it's red and it stands out and you can look up and see it. But when you get into these concepts of Venus and Jupiter and Saturn, and which you can clearly see in the night sky, and then you look over and you see the moon, right? And are you making these connect? And how are you doing that? And did you know, on the same subject, yesterday was the anniversary of the discovery of Pluto?
I didn't realize that yesterday was the anniversary.
Okay, guess what year?
That would have been 1920s, I think, if I remember
Yeah,
correctly.
1930. Yeah, it's a good
19 okay.
guess.
Yep.
1930. That's recent history. Yeah, that's it just blows my mind. Just blows my mind. Now, um, with Tesla and with Marconi and major newspapers all chiming in on this story and reporting the news, then you had everybody else out there that was also trying to make contact with Martians, didn't we?
Oh, there were lots of people trying to make contact with Martians. Some of the ways were really amazing. You know, these schemes that they had to send signals to Mars. One of them was the head of astronomy at Harvard, William Henry Pickering. He devised a plan of 50 giant mirrors that would reflect lights, flash lights at Martians. And this was like a massive, massive scale, field of mirrors, basically. And he thought, hey, if we keep flashing these lights, eventually they'll see our signals. It may take them a year or two to send a signal back. But he thought that could work. But that was going to cost, I think, $10 million back then. This was like 1909, by the way. So that was
Right.
about, I think, $250 million back then. So he never got the funding to try it. But this was, again, head of astronomy at Harvard was proposing this as a means to contact Mars. There's another guy. Do you know Professor David Todd? Are you familiar with him from the same
A
era?
little bit. Yes, yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes.
So he was an astronomer at Amherst, and he wanted to have a hot air balloon to send 50,000 feet into the air. And he thought that way he could receive the signals from Mars without any interference. And so he did a test flight. He went 5,000 feet in the air with his wife. No one had gone 50,000 feet at that point. And of course, he did end up doing it. He tried it a second time in 1920, and he actually had the government working with him, like the chief balloon officer for that title. So the government was working with him, and then they pulled the plug at the last minute. But he actually thought he was going to get the job done and ascend 50,000 feet and capture these amazing signals from the Martians. And another guy, Robert Wood of Johns Hopkins, he wanted to have a huge field. This was going to be cheaper than the mirrors proposed by Pickering. He was going to get like a black cloth, put it out in the White Sands Desert, and then have like rollers that would roll them up and then unroll them. And he thought if you had this massive field of these black cloths rolling up and unrolling, would look like a big wink from Earth. And that he thought would be much cheaper and would be just as effective. Of course, that didn't work either. That never happened. But
That's
these
actually a
are
good
plans,
idea.
actual
Yeah.
plans by real scientists.
Well, and talking to Avi Loeb, this is as strange as that may sound, right? And seem. Avi Loeb says that we can do just that. If we were out at Pluto looking back at Earth with a telescope, we would be able to see city lights.
Hmm.
Okay. Right now, that's pretty. So the concepts that you're talking about right there from Mars coming back here. Yeah, of course.
Not far at all.
It's not that extreme. I'm kind of okay with the idea. It's pretty creative, actually.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
A lot easier to wrap your head around than decoding the signature of hydrogen into a radio signal and creating an alphabet, which is, you know, what other physicists have proposed over the years, and SETI and so forth.
Right.
But now, what about the idea today of a fake alien invasion? Do you think, as crazy as this world is something like that possible with today's society? And normally I would say no, but then you go back and you talk about War of the Worlds, but it happened then, didn't it? And people reacted.
You know what? The thing I love about War of the Worlds, I'm glad you brought that up, because the things we were just discussing is something I don't know how many people are aware of all the things we were just talking about, how much was going on in the early part of the 1900s, in the late 1800s. But, you know, growing up, War of the Worlds broadcast from Orson Welles in 1938, that was something I always knew about, the panic and how people thought Martians were really attacking. And it sounds crazy, right? Like, how could people actually believe that? But then when you have the context of all the kinds of stories we were just talking about, these were headlines in major newspapers across the country. These weren't like small stories. This was like front page news, a lot. So you've basically had the country primed for decades from top scientists, newspapers, that Martians were out there. They were intelligent. They could be communicating with us any day. So, so it doesn't seem shocking, knowing all that they might actually believe that this was happening. Obviously, they missed the beginning of the broadcast. It said it was a dramatization. They were listening to a ventriloquist on the radio, Edgar Bergen and Charlie McCarthy, which is also very weird that the ventriloquism was popular on the radio. I don't get that, but it's a different time, I suppose. But that one doesn't make sense to me. But you know, they were kind of primed for it, you know. And then of course you had World War II breaking out. So there was lots of emergency break-ins anyway about news coming in. So the way Orson Welles did it was just genius. I mean, radio was still fairly new medium, and he used it so brilliantly. So I think that's what, you know, all those things came together and made that phenomenon really happen. Today, you know, today's so interesting because I feel like we have so much more technology now to try to capture evidence. If something's out there, everyone's got a camera in their hand. Maybe we'll finally get some video of something. But then at the same time, because that technology is so great, it's so easy to fake something. Like AI can do the most amazing things now that I think if someone actually captures video, I don't know if anyone will believe it.
Yeah,
because we can fake it just as easily.
Unless the boy who cried wolf.
Yeah. It's really a bizarre thing. Like, oh, now we can maybe capture something, and now no one will believe it when we do, because we can fake it just as well. But I don't know. We'll see what happens. I'm still hopeful that we'll have some amazing, indisputable revelation in the near future.
Well, but you're so right. There's so much out there right now, and so we have this craziness with New Jersey, right, and the drone. And what happened around the world. It wasn't just New Jersey, of all places, by the way. We were talking about Orson Welles, right? So New Jersey and the drones, but there was zero impact. We see it all the time now. You would think that on any other day, any other year, something like that is breaking. It's a big deal, and it was a big deal for a minute, but people aren't impressed with that anymore. I don't know what kind of video it would take to get people to react.
I like I said, I think you'd have to see it with your own eyes, and it can't just be something in the sky anymore. I mean, maybe to a certain degree it could, because like you said, people saw these drones all the time. Like, you know, one of my work partners saw them out in New Jersey, and UFOs never came to his mind. He just assumed this is drone technology, someone's testing it, and didn't seem to trouble him at all, you know. But if something came and you saw something, or some creature came and you could see it, I feel like that's what it's going to take. something that you
It-
can't explain in any other way.
right, right, right. I live here in Palmdale in the desert. And I'm just gonna say it. I live on a golf course. Okay. And in a pretty, you would think in the neighborhood that I live in that we wouldn't have crazy. Okay. All right. I'll leave it at that. So in the middle of the drone hysteria, after the show, I go out into my kitchen and I'm cooking. All right. And my phone, my neighborhood watch app goes off. Blip, blip, which normally I don't look at because it's missing dog, missing cat, found dog, found cat,
Yep.
whatever.
Right.
Okay. But I just happened to glance down and it says, and it's like neighbor number 2, it says drones, 20 drones over the golf course. I was like, what? And then it just lit up. Blip, 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 blip. It's all my neighbors, right? Okay. So, and I'm reading, they're going north, they're going this way. I can't believe how many there are. And I posted this online the next day. Anyway, I walk out my front yard. There's nothing. And the post, now I see the map. I see it marked. I'm looking and there's nothing there. Now, what is going on?
Yeah. Why are they there?
Yeah. Why are they posting, or are they seeing something that was no longer there? I can't dismiss that. I don't think it was their imagination, but here's the other part. I now know that even my neighbors are looking to the sky. This isn't some local phenomenon, right? This is UAP, UFOs, the media, Fox, Congress, the Senate, right? Hearings, all of this. Yeah, it's taken root. People are looking to the sky like never before.
They are. Well, that's a big part of it too. Is like you said, people are looking up, and when people are looking up, they're more likely to see some things finally, right? Like maybe this stuff has been there and no one's just seeing it because they're not looking up. Most people are looking down at their phone half the time. So looking up is an achievement. But I mean, it is great that Congress is looking into this and taking it more seriously. And I know so much of that is, when Christopher Mellon put all these videos out back in 2017 to New York Times, his big reasoning was this is a matter of national defense. Whether it's UFOs or not, something is in our airspace that people are seeing and the government doesn't know what it is. And that's not good. Whether it's UFOs or a foreign adversary, like we should know what's there, right? So that needs to be looked into and needs to be identified and understood one way or the other. So it's good that it's taking it seriously. I just hope that we'll actually learn what some of these things are in more detail.
Yeah, it's it's a fascinating time to be doing what we are doing right now. It seems tangible. You know what I mean? Like there's something about to break, and it's never been quite like this before. And also, I wanted to, before we move on, to ask you about some of the evidence, both recent and historical, with Mars landers and Perseverance and Curiosity and everything else that we have done over the years. Do you look at those photographs closely and maybe scratch your head going, that doesn't look quite natural? Do you ever see anything strange?
I see some of those pictures coming back from Mars from the rovers, and it's hard to tell. I mean, yeah, some of them get zoomed in so tight, and so you see a thing. Oh, is that a door? But maybe it's just a small, tiny thing, and how much of that is pareidolia? Kind of forming answers in your mind, seeing patterns. Here's what I will say, though, because you talked about the evidence from the rovers. And what I find so fascinating about the Mars missions is the Viking mission, which had the 2 landers, and both landers had life detection tests. And on both landers, one of those tests came back with positive results for life. And I don't think many people know about that. I learned about this while I was writing the Big Book of Mars, and I talked to the 2 co-experimenters who worked on that project. Both have since passed on, sadly, but they were one was 95 when I spoke to him, but still writing white papers about his data and his evidence. And to that, basically till his dying day, he firmly believed in his data, and he did so many tests and everything checked out. And again, for it to come back positive on two different sides of the planet, on both landers, basically they scooped up a bit of soil from
squirted some water in it. Yeah.
Radioactive nutrient.
Yeah.
And the
Shook it
radioactive
up
nutrient,
yeah.
it metabolized, the gases came out that showed it was metabolized basically. So NASA at that point said they didn't want to have those results come out. They believed it may have been an exotic chemical reaction, so they weren't convinced it was biological. But Gil Levin and Pat Stratt were convinced in their data. So it wasn't until I think the mid 90s that they finally came out and shared their data. And that was after Bill Clinton came out and talked about a meteorite that was found from Mars where they believed they found evidence of life in it, which I think ended up not being the case. But he made that announcement on the White House lawn. And then Gil Levin said, okay, the president's talking about, I'm going to share my data. It's been long enough. And he started writing all these papers about what he'd found. But no one's ever repeated those tests. And it seems so likely that there could be at least microorganisms living on Mars under the surface, because the surface is horrific, right? The solar radiation would kill anything there, at least life as we know it. But I can't imagine life could be so drastically different based on physics from here to there. But beneath the surface, there's no reason you couldn't have microorganisms living. We see evidence of that here on Earth. I think like 99% of life on Earth is beneath the surface. And then you go down into like mines, like a mile beneath the surface of Earth, and you have creatures living with no sunlight whatsoever, right? They're surviving. Life thrives. You have tardigrades that seem to, be like immortal.
Yeah,
things can live through anything.
Pretty close to immortal for sure.
Yeah. So, why couldn't something be living beneath the surface? They just haven't been able to check for that. We know that there's water. We know that there's, the building blocks for life beneath the surface. So it seems like if they can dig far enough and do further tests, I think that they'll find something there. I don't think it'll be something that built, civilizations on Mars, but I do think they'll at least find life, which would be amazing, right?
Last week, I read. Okay, now I'm going to throw a question out at you. This isn't to stump you or anything like that, but this blew my mind. So I'm going to ask you, percentage-wise, 0 to 100, what's the percentage of species discovered on this planet?
Oh, that's been discovered thus far?
Yep.
Oh, that's a tough question. See, that's an interesting question, because this is where I think you have human arrogance that would assume we've found it all by now.
Right. Yeah. You're thinking the right way.
I think there's so much of the ocean that we haven't discovered yet, and probably underground.
You're also thinking the right way. You're too smart.
I'll just guess. I'll throw out 50.
4.
4.
4. And,
yeah,
I was like, you've
How
got
did they
to be
that?
kidding me. Right. 4%. That's it. And we're discussing life in the universe, and is that we haven't even figured out our backyard.
Yeah. Well, that's another really fascinating way to look at all this, because you talked about life underground, microorganisms. How long did we exist as a species before we knew any of that existed? Like a long time, right? Before we knew any of that was with us. I know Lou Elizondo talks about the same thing with fungi. Like that was a whole other,
Well, yeah.
life no one knew about for a long time.
Absolutely. Bacteria.
Yeah.
That's modern history, man. That's new science.
Yeah. So who's to say, yes, that we're not going to learn so much more about the world we live in here in physics. And I just saw an article today that said that the James Webb telescope has found like all these new bits of physics in the universe that were completely unknown to us. Which is,
check this. We're talking about the same thing, the press release from today. We have spotted flashes of light in our black hole at the center of the Milky Way in Sagittarius A.
Oh wow!
Yeah. So it's around the fringe, right? And it's never been seen before. And it's like brand new science, and there's so so little that we really, really know and understand.
Yeah.
Very little.
Well, James Webb is fascinating because that is going to help us, I think, learn a lot more, obviously, but also its successor, which is in the works now, and I think will launch in 20 years or so. I was talking to a NASA scientist. I wrote about this in We Are Not Alone, talking about technosignatures and how the combination of those two can pick up different data from exoplanets that can determine if there might be technology on that planet. And they can tell that from the atmosphere and then climate models, basically checking pollution levels and determining if those pollution levels are not natural.
Right.
Yeah, they're artificial. So some technology would be producing it. And obviously, if there's technology, there's intelligent life created technology. But what's interesting about that is you can't assume that means that there's life there, because the life could be elsewhere, which we have evidence on with Mars right now. We have robots on Mars, but no one's living there. So we might find technology, but then we can't guarantee that there's life, but maybe they pick up biosignatures as well. And then you can make those conclusions. But all that data is like going to become accessible to us, within our lifetimes, which is really exciting. Like maybe we're really going to find something out, whether it's coming here or not, knowing whether or not there's life out there that's intelligent. I just think that would be amazing to really have tangible evidence of it.
And we have stuff like right in our backyard that, back to your point, for some reason it just goes ignored, like the testing from Viking, right?
Yeah.
Is Phobos.
Yeah.
Phobos is a fascinating situation. And I like my eyeballs. Okay. I can listen to somebody's stories and whatever. You know what I trust? These things right here. Right? And you look at those photographs of Phobos and something's going on there. And then you have everything else, right? The stack of evidence that is around Phobos that says that there's something going on there. And that includes the photographs from the Soviet Union, the flying saucer that came in and took out their probe that was going to Mars and was taking pictures at the time. That looks artificial. I don't have another way to put it. The monolith on Phobos is ignored. And you would think that, what did we just do, Mark? We just landed on Bennu. How crazy is that?
The asteroid, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We sent out a probe that landed on Bennu, scooped up some stuff, and came back to Earth.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Holy shit, right? It's like, whoa. But we can't go to Phobos.
Yeah, why not?
Right?
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, why aren't we going and looking at those things? We are at least going to Europa, which is another really interesting one. Europa's got the oceans with 10 miles of ice on top of it. Can you even fathom 10 miles of ice? And then you've got the deep oceans far deeper than we have here. So what could be beneath that 10 miles of ice living in that water? Who knows? But
that seems how do you get to it? I've read a couple of proposals, right? How to do it. And one of them is pretty simple, actually. You build a fire, right? So it's like an inverted titanium bullet. Throw some nuclear material in there and let it, just heat up and react and just melt, right? And just melt its way eventually through that. I mean, but how else are you going to do it from this kind of distance?
Yeah.
Arthur C. Clarke's been writing about Europa for years. And
that was brilliant. He predicted everything. He saw everything.
Yeah, absolutely. Have you I love talking UFOs with you, man, I swear. Have you ever seen anything?
I haven't seen. The only thing I can say I saw, and I don't know, I really don't know what this was. When I was writing We Are Not Alone, I went to New Mexico for research, and I was visiting I don't know if you're familiar with Dave Marler. He's got a massive UFO archive. Great guy.
The
So I was
best.
staying outside of the Rio Rancho area, Albuquerque, at a Airbnb type place, and it was like you're saying, you've got the great skies out there in the desert, right? So this was kind of out in the middle of nowhere. There's not a lot of lights. So I got to this place at like 10 o'clock at night, and I said, I just want to stand outside and then look at the stars because I'm in New Mexico, out kind of in the middle of nowhere. It's not like I live in New York where we got lights everywhere and you don't get the best view of the sky. So I wanted to just take it in and appreciate where I was. So I'm looking up and it's full of dots, all the stars in the skies. And I see just one of those dots, the same size as the others of the other stars, and it's going like this, like rubbing my eyes, like, what am I seeing? Like, that doesn't make sense. I look up again, and I still see just this one thing just going like this. Like, what the hell am I looking at? This is so bizarre. I couldn't understand. Am I seeing things or what? I'm looking away. I'm looking back up, and I still see it. So I have no idea what I was seeing. That's the only thing I can say that was a little bit weird to me. But other than that, like, I haven't seen more of the types of UFOs that you hear a lot of other witnesses claiming they see. Obviously, much closer. Plenty of stories of people seeing things treetop level high, or obviously encounters, or of course you've got abduction stories. So nothing of that level by any means. But that was kind of weird for me.
It makes you think about, if you can go out, well, it is the UFO motherland, New Mexico. So you better see something. But that if you can go out there on any given moment of the night and happen to look up and see that, well, then what's going on all the time, right? What if you were facing this way? Would you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so when you look throughout history where you hear about these types of sightings in the sky, these anomalies that aren't fitting the pattern of the rest of the sky, what is it that people are seeing? That's a great sighting right there.
Definitely weird.
But yeah. And there were historical experiences that go back a couple of thousand years and more, with different philosophers, Egypt, the Middle East, and also in Europe, that said the stars were shaking. Right now, it sounds like that's what you saw.
Yeah, that's what it felt like, because it was clearly not the motion of a plane lights. Obviously, that's smooth, right moving. Satellite would be. This was just it was like a moth flying around a light bulb. You know what I mean? It was just no rhyme or reason to it. It was just bizarre.
About 3 years ago, I've seen this quite a bit since then, but I live next to Lockheed Skunk Works.
Oh, cool.
All right. Yeah. No, when I say next to, I'm saying next to, not the next county over. No, it's right here. It's a mile away. And here's the thing with that. If they are doing their job, and they do it well, they are building and testing all kinds of crazy stuff. It's their job.
Yep.
Right? Okay. And Northrop Grumman's there, NASA's there, Air Force Plant 42. It's all part of the same complex. It's right up the street. So if you want to have fun, go in my backyard. We'll pull up a couple of chairs, crack a couple of brewskis, put on some Van Halen, and just watch. Right? And so one night, this is like 3 years ago, I'm looking and I see right above Skunk Works, and it's probably, I'm going to say, a mile or two up, pretty high. But I see a star that's acting funny, like what you're talking about. And it's sitting there, but it's like blinking and flickering in one spot. So I break out my binoculars and I look at it, and I could see a little bit of a shape. I'm going to say flat and square. Okay. All right. I don't want to give away more than that, but A flying carpet. I don't know. Anyway, that's an observation platform. That's like battlefield management stuff, right? Something you would park above something for observation. And I think they were testing it. But and I'm okay with that. But to anybody else that would see something like that, it's a UFO.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, well, that was the case with lots of things, right? Like that's Area 51 was a lot that way too with the U2 and
100%.
yeah, high altitude pilots didn't think anything could fly that high, so they were like, "What is that? Must be a UFO." And of course, the government was more than happy for them to believe that because they didn't want to let the secrets out. This was all Cold War stuff, and it was top secret. So sure, let them think it's a UFO. It's fine.
You know what? If you want to keep something hidden in plain sight, let you and I, the crazy tinfoil hat crowd, call it a UFO.
Yeah,
and then nobody's going to say anything. We're just crazy.
Exactly. Yeah.
And here's the other thing, and you bring up one of the best points. Whether it's Lockheed, General Electric, General Dynamics, right? Pick a private corporation, and then pick a branch of the military, and then throw in some NASA for good measure. They're not communicating with each other. They're not.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
They don't know what the other person is working on, and they shouldn't. Right? That's how secrets get out.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And when you hear something like with the Nimitz, all the questions were asked about that. Is it us testing on our own military? Is it UFOs? Is it an adversary? Right? All of those are legit questions.
Absolutely. Yeah. And they denied it was anything that we were doing, but who's to say that that's true or not, right? Like we don't know, but I'd like to think it's not a foreign adversary. Seems like if it was, we'd probably know by now in a negative way.
When the report first came out, the first task force report, if you remember, they had, it's not us, it's not them, and now we have the other bin.
Yes, right. The other bin.
Remember that?
Yes,
that?
I do.
And I was thinking to myself,
Other.
I would rather have it be other than our adversaries with anti-gravitic, Mach 20 technology that we can't defend it against.
Yeah. It seems like if it's other, they haven't done anything to us yet, so maybe it's okay, but it'd be nice to know what that really was at some point.
Why do you I'm trying to get off this subject, but I can't with you. Why where there's such a negative alien invasion context put on the subject from Hollywood, that's everywhere. That's makes for a good movie. I get that. I understand. But there's no evidence that ET is pissed at us.
No, it's I think you're right. It's storytelling. It's action and adventure, but you'd like to think that if they were going to come here, it would be more out of curiosity or friendship. I mean, that's how a lot of it was. I mean, if you look back in the 50s when you had the contactees who were saying that they were in contact with Martians and Venusians and people from Saturn and Jovians, all these people in our solar system, they were all here trying to warn us against ourselves and save us from the nuclear, the atomic age. And it was much more benevolent. They weren't trying to hurt us. They were trying to save us. And it's interesting. If you look back at like earlier science fiction stories before that was a term, like the late 1800s, before H.G. Wells wrote The War of the Worlds, most of the stories were about more utopian fiction, about like Mars, for example, that the Martians were advanced and they were better than us, and we should aspire to be like them. And they used religion and God, and women wrote stories about this to show how women had rights, to kind of, again, paint a better picture of what life should be like here on Earth by using Mars as like a blank canvas, so to speak. So it's been used in like lots of positive ways like that, but H.G. Wells, I think, kind of flipped all that when he had War of the Worlds and the attack, and then so much of that has just followed that same kind of structure. It's more exciting.
Do we have a reason to fear ET? Not really.
I kind of don't think so. I feel like I said, if if they wanted to do something to us, it would have happened by now. If they've truly been here, right? Like, we could be gone. I mean, you also hear the other narrative you hear is that they're also still protecting us from nuclear programs. That you hear about all the sightings over nuclear sites. Again, this is just different narratives out there in the sort of world of ufology, right? That they're stopping anything from happening with the nuclear programs, nuclear sites. So who knows? I mean, it's nice to think that there's some benevolent creature looking out for us, or species looking out for us, but who's to say?
Why throw the label of national security on all of this when where's the paranoia coming from? Why is it a national security issue when we haven't been presented with a risk of our national security when it comes to ET? Because when they throw that blanket over it, Mark, suddenly they are keeping nature from us. What's the big secret? It's nature. It's the universe. It's life. We have a right as human beings with this knowledge.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. I think you're absolutely right. I think that the national security argument, that's what gets the government to take it seriously and get over that stigma of aliens, right? So like now it's about defending our country, and that's important. And I mean, I think a good example of that was what was it? Was it February of 2023 when we had the Chinese weather balloon?
Oh, that
was
was like
spying on us?
that was further back than that, wasn't it? Was it 3 years ago?
I think it was 23.
Was
Or
it?
was it 22? Maybe it was 22. Anyway, I know it's all flying by. but that was that 2 weeks when you had the Chinese spy balloon that got shot down, but it had like gone across the country. How was that not spotted right away? Why was that allowed to even be here? And then you had those, was it 4 that were shot down over the
In
course of
Canada.
next week?
Yeah,
Yeah, in
yeah.
Canada. Like it,
Mhm.
and they were never identified, which is also weird. But again, like, what are these things that we don't know that are flying over our country or over Canada, close to our country? I mean, that's bizarre, and that should be made aware of. So I think it is paying attention to these things so we do know what's out there. And again, put UFOs aside, just know if other countries are spying on us, we should be aware and prevent that from happening. So that makes it a matter of national defense. If it happens to be UFOs and we learn that, then great. If it made them pay attention to get the evidence or the data, then something good comes out of it.
Yeah, I
Hopefully.
remember I was driving around. I was coming back from the Conscious Life Expo when that happened over the weekend. We had the 2 sightings over the weekend. Excuse me. And I'm driving home in my car and I'm thinking, we are shooting missiles over North America at UFOs. We are shooting them down
Yeah.
in our airspace.
There are crazy headlines on the newspapers that
What?
week.
Yeah, I was like,
Yeah.
wait, what?
Yeah.
And that's only what we know about. I hate to go
True.
down that road, but that's just what the government chose to tell us about. There's no tell what goes on over the Atlantic Ocean or the Pacific Ocean, away from civilization and the ability to witness or report on anything. What goes on every single day?
Yeah.
And
Well, you mentioned Nimitz, and you hear those pilots talk about seeing them all the time. All the time.
every day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. What is it?
Every day, man. Yeah. We fly out, there they are, and
Yeah.
it does make you wonder. And the question that I have before we move on, when you look at somebody like Arthur C. Clarke, that has put out, he's not the only writer to do this, but to have a craft approaching some spaceship, approaching our star system, and we were tracking it. And if it's not moving at the speed of light, it would take years to get here.
Yeah.
Years. How
Yeah.
long has it taken Voyager to get out of the solar system, right? It takes a long time.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah. So we would have a heads up. But the reality is, if somebody out there is more advanced than us and they are getting here, they're not going to do it like that. They're just going to appear here.
Yeah, there have to be something that we haven't discovered about physics yet that lets them traverse that. I mean, that's what Frank Drake basically said with his Drake equation, was that, yes, the numbers suggest that there's tens of thousands of intelligent civilizations, but the distance suggests that there's no way they'll ever get here. So he admitted the idea of intelligent life, but did not believe, he thought that we were like basically quarantined from anything getting here, just purely based on the distance. And it is hard to imagine, a light year is 6 trillion miles, and there's nothing within a light year, so we're talking multiple light years away. It's hard to imagine. I also find it interesting to think that, okay, like, let's just say there is something that's out there. Is it out there at the same point of time in the universe that we're here to receive it or make contact with it? I mean, we're what, 13 billion years in the universe, and we're like a tiny blip of that. So there has to be something else that's a tiny blip that's evolved at the same point or beyond where we are, and has survived to get here. And to me, that's also the amazing feat for us to line up that way.
Yeah, it's one of the best points that one can make. 13.8 billion years, and we don't even know if that's a real number, right? But let's say let's go with that.
Yeah,
we've only got 300, maybe 400 years of real science.
Yeah, I'm looking.
Right. That's it.
Yeah.
Okay. So if you want to go beyond Newton and go back to Copernicus and Galileo, okay. All right. Fine. That's fine. Okay. So let's push it to 500 years. What is that in 13.8 billion years?
Right. It's nothing.
It's nothing.
Yeah.
It's nothing. So if the life out there, all of it is older than us. Right. And all of it. There's,
it could have come here
younger
when nothing was here yet.
Right.
And then passed by because it was a dead planet, or for all it was nothing there.
See, and that is, man, you're just full of good points tonight. You should write a book. You should write a book about this. Yeah. I'll write the foreword.
Awesome.
Okay. But it's so true. People some do, but don't really grasp this concept. If you're looking through a telescope at a distant spot, you are looking at the past.
Yeah.
You're not looking in real time like now.
Yeah.
So if somebody is looking at us, right? Yeah. If somebody's looking at us from 2,000 light years away, 10,000 light years away, 20,000, how about 100,000? Dude, they could be looking at dinosaurs.
Right. That's right.
Yeah.
Or before.
They're not looking at you and I.
Right.
And technology. No. They're looking at Neanderthal clubbing a caribou for dinner. Right?
I think that our first radio signals from television, being put out into the universe, I think that's just maybe arriving at some place that could receive something. So they if they're getting anything, they might be, catch and leave at the beaver or something by now, Yeah,
because if we just go, well, let's say if we go in totality and we go to the beginning with Marconi, and they were blasting major Tesla, right? They didn't have any FCC regulations back then. They were just lighting that stuff up and firing it out there. And, 100,000 million watts or whatever. But at the speed of light, so let's push it back, say 125 years, 150 years at the most. So that means if you push out, let's go 75 years out. 75. Because anything reaching out 75 years and a response back would take another 75 years. That's 150 years. So we should possibly have a hello signal today. Anytime from here forward. I wouldn't be surprised if it happens.
That would be amazing.
Yeah.
Tesla finally gets his answer. Tesla believed in this till his dying day also.
Oh, 100%. And he should. Yeah, for sure. I did a star count. How many stars around planet Earth are within 100 light years?
How many stars within 100 light years?
That we could potentially reach, like you're saying. I know the answer.
I'm not sure.
I have a basic answer.
3,000. 3,000? It's a little more than I was 3, thinking. Okay.
Yeah, 3,000. How many of those have planets? All of them. Okay, they do. That's part of the formation of a star. We understand that now, right? Every star's got an exoplanet. How many of those support life? Well, it only takes one.
Yeah.
Yep. And that's not a lot. It's not, but it's a bigger number than we knew about 25 years ago. Because 25 years ago, it was 0.
Yeah. No, they keep finding more and more exoplanets. The other thing too is that we're actually on the sort of the edge of the Milky Way, which is a safer place to be in the galaxy. A lot of these other stars are closer in toward the center, where it's a lot more dangerous. There's things like gamma ray bursts that explode everything. It's like the whole power of the sun exploding in the day would wipe everything out in its path. Any plants that were there developing would be gone. So there's all these other little variables and factors that go into it. Again, it's easy to look at the numbers, but there's a lot of other things that go into it as well, that just make us more and more special, that we're here.
About 5 years ago, the report started coming in about Proxima B, right? This planet, it's 4.5 light years away, binary star system, blah, blah, blah. A couple of planets out there looking pretty good. One is in the Goldilocks zone, but it's tidally locked, right? So half of Proxima B is always facing its sun, right? It's always facing its star. So where would you build your house on that? You'd build it right on the equator, right? Or whatever, half shadow, half light, right? Okay. That's where you would live in that band. Anyway. And it was pretty exciting news. About 3 months later, you know what happened?
It's gone.
Had a gamma ray burst.
Yeah.
And toasted the planet. It was like, it was crazy. It was like 1,000,000 degrees. So whatever was there,
gone.
Yeah. Just a big lump of coal. So it was like, scrap that idea.
Think of how lucky we are. Like the fact that, like you were talking about the dinosaurs before, right? Hundreds of millions of years with dinosaurs, and they didn't really do much. They didn't evolve, right? They were what they were. And then this, meteorite hits the Earth and wipes them all out. Again, assuming that seems like that's pretty, accurate, telling of what happened. And then some mammals kind of scurry and hide and survive and evolve into us. And now here we are. But what if that didn't hit? Like, what if that missed the Earth? Would we have ever gotten here? Dinosaurs have just continued, bumping around the Earth.
So let's. This is like when you smoke weed. This is a smoking weed conversation. Okay, so check this out. So, Mark, what if the asteroid doesn't hit? Do dinosaurs evolve and build radio telescopes?
Yeah, see, I think not. They had their chance.
Really?
They had their chance. They had hundreds of millions of years. They did nothing. Yeah.
You don't think they build the internet? You don't think Steve Jobs comes out of that? Yeah, DinoNet. All right. Our guest tonight, Marc Hartzman, and let's take our break. When we come back, we're going to discuss his new book, and it's called The Hilt.
To the Hilt. A sword swallower's history of sword swallowing.
This is going to be great. It's not what you think. We'll do that when we come back. Stay with us. This is Fate. Subscribe to our YouTube channel to get your alerts and access to over 2,000 videos. Click that subscribe button right now. Go to jimmychurchradio.com and get the Fade to Black official podcast. 2,000 episodes, all of them commercial free for just $2 a month. Watch Into the Vortex on Gaia TV. It's Fade to Black for the screen. Simple to do. Go to Gaia.com, search Jimmy Church, or click on the link below. Follow Fade to Black on Twitter at JChurchRadio. Get all of the show updates every single day. It's now called X, but who cares? How you doing? Jimmy Church here. Special announcement. Get your Fade to Black t-shirts. That's right. Help support the show. Help support everything that we do over here. We've got 2 t-shirts. We've got 2 ways to get them. Get your Fade to Black t-shirt today. Go Backley Tappy. Go to jimmychurchradio.com and become a Fadernaut. Get a membership. That's right. Everything is commercial free. You have access to downloads, and you get to call yourself a Fadernaut. Today we're headed to Bolivia, Tiwanaku, Peru, and of course, Omapunku. Brian, exciting. Thank you so much for everything, my friend.
Always an honor. Right behind us is the sacred river of the Inca that goes past Machu Picchu. So we're going to be driving up to its source at 15,000 feet above sea level and then down to Lake Titicaca.
So today we hit 15,000 feet.
Yes.
Crazy. And you can do it with us. All you have to do is go to hiddenincatours.com. Simple. We've got 2 tours coming up next year, one in June for the summer solstice, right? And then another one right here in November. So hiddenincatours.com. Come and hang out with Brian and I and his amazing team.
Right on.
River Moon Coffee, makers of the Fade to Black blend. Truly the best coffee on planet Earth. Just visit rivermoonwellness.com or their Amazon store. It's all simple to do. You can check out the Fade to Black blend, the Game Changer blend, or any of their Black Moon Wellness products. It's the only coffee I drink. It is the best, and it's Doc. Again, rivermoonwellness.com. All right. Welcome back, Fade to Black. I am your host, Jimmy Church, tonight. Marc Hartzman is with us, and we're going to discuss his new book. It's called To the Hilt, about sword swallowing. Say that 3 times really fast.
Yeah.
Say it.
Sword swallowing, sword swallowing, sword swallowing.
Oh, not bad, not bad, not bad. When I was a kid, I at a very, very young age, I was probably 4, 5, right around kindergarten-ish. And next to our the army base that we lived on, the carnival would come in every summer. It was great, right? Go there with the family.
Yeah.
And one year, my dad takes me in to the freak show. I think that's what it was called, by the way. I think that's what was,
Probably.
Yeah. And so I go in, and a couple of things happened to me, and I'm sure you did the same thing. One of his name was Popeye.
Oh yeah.
Oh, you know who I'm talking about?
Yes. I'll let you
Okay.
describe it.
Well, so I'm looking at the painting of him on the tent right outside. I was like, what? I'm little, right? And so I go in and pop. So I'm standing there. I'm in the front. I'm right there. And he walks out on stage, and he takes off his sunglasses. Older black guy, by the way, tall dude. And he looks straight at me, and his eyes popped out of his head.
Yeah.
And I'm looking, and I was like, oh my God. Changed me.
What a sight.
Yeah, changed me. So next, we'll circle back to Popeye. But then the sword swallower comes out. And I had no idea what that even meant or anything. But to see this go on for 10 or 15 minutes was a mind-blowing, life-changing experience. When you had your first I mean, how did that impact you?
Seeing the first sword swallower?
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember when if I saw one when I was a kid also, because I used to go to the Renaissance Festival in Colorado all the time where I grew up, and they had sword swallowers there, because I know one of them I met later on, who I'll get to in a second. But I can't remember if I saw them or not, to be honest. But what really got me going with all this, I mean, I've always loved the odd and unusual. I got into all this stuff with the Guinness books when I was a kid, and Robert Wadlow, and he was the tallest man ever at 8'11.5" tall. So all these like human oddities really fascinated me from a very early age. I saw the Elephant Man when I was like 8 years old. And that really stuck with me. But then I started writing about sideshows for a zine I was publishing started in like 96, 95, 96, called Backwash. And then I was living in New York City, and I went to this little museum on the Lower East Side called the Freakatorium. And the guy who ran it was a sword swallower who'd been touring for 20 some years at that point, and had collected this amazing collection of sideshow memorabilia. So pitch cards and various items, tools that the armless man used to carve with his feet, and posters, and two-headed creatures, just all kinds of stuff. I mean, it was packed like floor to ceiling, and stuff on the ceiling as well. So there was so much to look at. And I started talking to the guy, and he pulls out a sword and just, swallows it right in front of my face right there. This is like one-on-one. And so that was pretty amazing to see just how effortlessly he's doing this kind of thing. He's, been doing it for, like I said, over 20 years. And I got to know him, and I interviewed him, and that really got me going on writing on sideshow performers. So I've always kind of loved this, and it was a sword swallower who really got me into writing about sideshows to begin with.
Why do we have this fascination with the sideshow? And this is nothing new. This goes it's a very old tradition, but we can't seem to get enough of it.
I mean, it's just curiosity again is innate in us, right? Like we see something different, and you want to look at it. So especially like, when you were seeing it when you were 4, and going back to the sort of the golden age of the sideshow, people didn't leave town much, right? Like you didn't get outside of your small town. You didn't have TV, again, I'm talking like, again, the golden age, the late 1800s, early 1900s. You didn't have movie theaters. So when the carnival, the circus came to town with the sideshows, that was your big entertainment. That's when you saw things that were different and people you didn't know existed, creatures you didn't know existed because they came from faraway places. So it was, it was amazing. It was exciting to see these things. And again, it's curiosity. You want to see something different and new. So, people who were born different, that's how they could make a living back then. They didn't have any other options. People would be institutionalized, or families would be ashamed and hide them away. But on the sideshow, they had camaraderie. They had each other. Everyone was different, and that was accepted. They made good money. They traveled the world. They found love. They had families. They supported their extended families who were born normal. So there were a lot of interesting things about that. And then you have the working acts, which were the sword swallowers, the fire eaters, the human blockheads. And they're basically fascinating us because what they're doing is what we believe to be impossible.
Wait, a human blockhead?
Yeah, that's where you take a nail and you pound it into your nose with a hammer.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. I've that one is, again, it's knowing how the body works. I've done that. That's something people can learn to do fairly quickly. Sword swallowing takes a lot of skill.
No, I'm not going to learn.
Don't go do it. Don't go do it.
No. Well, what makes somebody wake up in the morning going, you know what, man, I want to swallow a sword?
Yeah, well, that's a good question.
Yeah,
and it's a question that sword swallowers get a lot. So my co-author on To the Hilt is Dan Meyer, who's been swallowing swords since the late 90s and has become an authority on the subject. So it's great to write with him because he's got so much knowledge and perspective as someone who does this and travels the world swallowing swords and goes on TV shows everywhere. And so for him and for a lot of sword swallowers, part of it is you kind of work your way up to it, right? So he started like in the world of juggling and unicycling and kind of those types of circus arts. Sideshow performers may start the same way, or maybe it's starting off with fire eating or the blockhead or the bed of nails or human pincushion. And you pick up these skills one after another. And the more you get, the more you want to learn. And sort of the ultimate skill is sword swallowing. That's the most difficult one to learn, takes the most training, and obviously is incredibly dangerous. People have died swallowing swords. It's 100% real. That's another question asked all the time is it real? But it is, and we can talk more about that. But I think to answer your question, a lot of it is working your way up to it, not just deciding on a whim to do it. On the other hand, there's other ways people get into it. Some of them are born into it. So we have sword swallowers in the book who were born in a circus family and their parents were sword swallowers. And so there's a guy named Jim Ball who's about to turn 90. He's the oldest living sword swallower right now. He's been doing this since 1947. He learned when he was 12 years old. His mother was a famous sword swallower. His dad was as well, but they had divorced when he was very young. So the dad was kind of out of the picture. But his mom was an entertainer and she traveled with other entertainers. And so he wanted to be an entertainer. And he realized he wasn't a magician. He couldn't do the other kinds of things that maybe would be a job on that circus. So he said, "Mom, teach me to swallow a sword." And so she did. And he had obviously a good mentor, and he did it. And that's, he's, like I said, he's been doing it for 77 years now. So that's another way people get into it. Others do it for love. There's lots of stories of, a woman, marries a sword swallower and he teaches her to swallow swords. And then they have a husband-wife act, or, again, there's just different ways that people find their way into this bizarre line of work.
Who was first? How far back in history does this go? I'm almost picturing like some kind of court jester in front of a king or something. I mean, how far back does this go historically?
So it's believed to go back several thousand years, likely
Really?
originating in India. But if you kind of trace the history of metallurgy, you have daggers, I think, were first believed to be made around 1600 BC, somewhere around there, 2000 BC. And so swords then came out of those. And were there fakirs in India who were swallowing them? It's quite possible. There's a lot of belief that that's the case. But it's also, you start to trace the movement of swords, and then when do people start having swords and being able to have time to do something that's not battle oriented, right? Now, there is a written ancient Roman text from 200 AD, or maybe I think it's maybe before 200 AD, around 100 something AD. And it has a description of a sword swallower performing. So while there's lots of evidence that there were sword swallowers in ancient India. There's written evidence for sure in the ancient Roman text from at least the 2nd century AD of sword swallowing. And it worked its way up through, China, Japan, street performers, and eventually got to Europe. And like you said, yes, there were people performing before kings, but a lot of that took a while because there was a belief, I think, that kind of art was maybe considered witchcraft. So you had to sort of get past that. So sword swallowing didn't really make its way to Europe, to England, for example, till the early 1800s. And then it started to really take off. Came to America in the early 1800s. And by 1893 at the Chicago World's Fair, you had sword swallowers and it became much more popular. And then again, you have this series of sword swallowers who mentor others. And you have like an interesting chain of performers, one taught another, and another passes along to another. And it kind of spreads till today. We have, numerous modern day sword swallowers performing.
The blades can't be sharp.
So the blades they'll dull the edges of the blade. They don't want to,
Right.
Again, they don't want to kill themselves.
Right.
And the point is probably not super sharp at the end, but it could still I know Dan has used it to cut like a cucumber on stage. Like he'll show this is real. This is a real.
No,
blade.
Really.
Yeah. And he'll like slam it into a block of wood to again show this isn't like some flimsy thing. This is, solid steel that he's putting down his throat. So they may not be razor sharp by any means, but it's still 2 feet of steel going into your body to the pit of your stomach. It goes, nudges the heart aside. It's going through various muscles, the sphincter, the gag reflexes. And if you do it wrong, and it's happened many times, people have severe injuries. And people will swallow all sorts of other long objects to prove that there's no retractable blade. Because people tend to think that it's going up in the handle, right? That's the common belief. So to avoid that, people have swallowed all kinds of things: giant hedge clippers, giant straight razors, a giant soup ladle with the handle going down, pool cues. Dan swallows a car axle from the 1920s, a 16-pound car axle. Neon tubes were very popular. A neon tube, when you put that down your throat, you turn the lights out on the stage, so it's all dark, and you see that neon glowing in the throat. So you actually see it right here. Again, proving it's down there, right? They've done X-rays showing it going through the body. Sword swallowers have helped develop the medical practice of endoscopy, and scientists have studied them to develop endoscopic tools. So it's completely legitimate and truly dangerous.
I remember watching a sword swallower let the sword go and just let it drop
it down, right?
Yeah.
Gravity. Yep.
And it bounced like off the bottom of his stomach. I don't even know how to. Yeah.
Dan will do that. He'll just tilt his head back and let it drop, and then oftentimes sword swallowers have a volunteer come up and pull it out of their mouth. And so we have in the book, we have about 80 biographies of historical sword swallowers, but then we interviewed modern day sword swallowers. And in that section, we just get their stories of crazy things that have happened to them. We call it cutting up jackpots, which is sideshow lingo for swapping stories. And so there's a couple of people who shared stories of calling a volunteer up to pull the sword out, just like draw it out from the mouth. And again, if you're doing that, you see it's coming right out of their body. People have, for whatever weird reason, gotten confused on the instructions of pulling the sword out, and they've pushed the sword in. And the guys are like, what are you doing here? They're backing up quickly and stopping them. Because, I mean, can you imagine, you're swallowing it to the bottom of your stomach and it's not supposed to go any further, and someone's coming and pushing it inside your body more. That sounds terrifying to me.
Have you been to Venice Beach?
Yes, Venice Beach Freak Show.
Oh, yes. Oh, man. So you've checked that out.
Oh yeah. I know Todd Ray, the owner. He's a great guy, and written about him a few times.
Real cool dude.
His daughter's in our book. She's a sword swallower.
They're all very nice, very cool. The whole group. But
Absolutely.
what is crazy about that is this is the modern take on the freak show.
The working acts, you're saying?
Yeah. It's the
Yeah.
modern take. It's the way that they dress, the way that they approach it, and it's a modern version of the freak show. It's fascinating to see.
Yeah. You don't have as many human anomalies in sideshows anymore. There are
No,
still
it's
some though.
about talent. No, it's a talent show, is what it is.
Yeah, it's showing, again, skills, things that you thought were impossible and then being proven possible right before your eyes.
I I I,
And
I freaked my daughters out with that a couple of times at Venice Beach. Uh, now I'm looking at a couple of things here, and I just want to get this in. Uh, Tell us about the man that got out of jail from swallowing swords.
yeah, so, in researching the book, you find all these really amazing, weird, quirky stories of sword swallowers. So this was a case in 1913. As a man named Lawrence Bowden, who was in Wisconsin, and he was at a bar, and he starts swallowing swords at the bar and just kind of putting on a show. And then, as not surprisingly, he kind of passes a hat around. Hey, give me some tips. Give me a little something for the show I just put on for you. And a police officer was there and put a stop to it. And I guess he had broken a local ordinance about performing a free show without a license. So he's a completely by the books kind of guy, and he takes the sword swallower Bowden down to the city jail, locks him up overnight. And the police chief comes in the morning and checks the log, I guess, and sees that there's a sword swallower who's been arrested and put in jail. So he goes and he checks out this guy and talks to him. And he's like, "You're a sword swallower, huh?" And so the guy, yes. And he shows him, gets some swords to show him that he can swallow the swords. And he says, "Hey, if I can swallow 8 of these at once, will you let me go?" And so the police chief says, "Hey, if you can swallow 8 of them at one time, yeah, I'll let you go." So we did it, swallowed all 8 together. And this is something sword swallowers swallow multiple swords somewhat frequently nowadays. And he got out of jail because of that.
With oh man, that's insane to me. What's how do modern sword swallowers approach this? Everything has got to be newer and flashier and crazier.
Yeah.
So how is it approached today versus the conventional way of doing things in the past?
Well, it is interesting how much people are pushing it and getting more creative with it. So first of all, it's one thing to learn to swallow a sword, but you have to learn how to present it. That's the big part, is knowing how to present it and engage an audience and keep them interested and make them really, want to understand that this is a real thing, and then really shock them when you do it. So there have been many ways people have done that, swallowing one sword and then, adding to that with multiple swords. In the past, sword swallowers have swallowed bayonets attached to a rifle, discharged the rifle, and the discharge kicks the bayonet down their throat. I mean, people have done some crazy things in the past, going way back. I mentioned neon tubes, which have been going back, I think, to at least the 50s, if I remember. I think even earlier than that. And that's always been really dangerous, because if that glass breaks in your throat, the neon gas is poisonous, and you got glass, and you got poison, and that's caused a lot of severe injuries. And one sword swallower did die from those injuries eventually. Nowadays, you have people going even further. I have one guy who was actually just on America's Got Talent this last season, Jelly Boy. He's done all kinds of amazing things. He swallows a sword with a flamethrower basically at the end of it, and blows fire at the end of the sword as he's swallowing it. So then he bends over with the sword and he's shooting fire out of it. He's also done one with a rifle going down his throat, swallowing the actual rifle, the barrel of it. There's a couple guys that have put integrated gymnastics into it, which is really hard to believe. A guy in Australia, Ariel Manx, does cartwheels with a sword down his throat. I mean, imagine that. It's literally like down his throat, and he's doing multiple cartwheels as he's doing. Another guy, Alex Magala, he was also I think on America's Got Talent years back. He was doing climbing up a pole, and then he'd swallow the sword, and then he'd turn it upside down and drop down the pole. So head first with the sword down his throat, and stop himself just shy of hitting the ground, where that hilt would have pushed up into his mouth if he hit the ground. So again, amping up the level of danger is something that we're seeing more and more of. There's another sword swallower we interviewed. Her name is, she goes by Thrill Kill Jill, and she swallowed swords while she was pregnant 3 times with all 3 of her sons, which I wrote about the first time she did this for Bizarre magazine years ago. And I was very nervous about it. I was like, sure you want to do this? And she said, oh yeah, I'm fine. But yeah, she swallowed swords safely while she was rather pregnant. So again, that
doesn't even
that's
sound
pushing
legal.
it to another level for sure.
Yeah, that doesn't even sound legal.
Yeah, I know. She said for her it was actually easier because she was pregnant. She would typically be swallowing swords with a corset on, just for the show, the costuming, right? And she said this was a relief to not have that on, and swallowing was actually easier for her. And the babies are fine, by the way. Everybody's fine.
That's my next question.
Yeah.
For you, when we're talking about sideshows, and sword swallowing, of course, but what has surprised you? What are some of the more unusual sideshow acts that even for you just stepped back and went, whoa?
Outside of sword swallowing, you're saying?
Yeah.
In terms of working acts or natural born freaks?
Well, I mean, because it's so varied and you see so much. So, yeah, I'm just curious. What would have you go, wow, okay, that's different.
One story I love is from the late 1800s. There was a man named Lalu, and he had a parasitic twin. So that's basically an unborn twin that's living off your body. So typically you'd have like in his case, it was a torso, arms and legs jutting out from his chest. I'm like size of like a baby, right? No head, just living off of your body. So parasitic twin. It had a functioning penis. So imagine what that's quite a sight to imagine, right? Like a guy with another body living off of his body. So as if that wasn't weird enough, the showman would dress this brother up as a girl. And so he could then present it as Lalu and his sister, which I always just thought was so amazing because it's like, it wasn't weird enough that he has another human being living off of his body. He went ahead and dressed up as a girl to make it even weirder that it's a sister living off of him. So that's an act I always thought must have been, again, quite incredible to witness that. The one you saw, Popeye. I mean, I know of Popeye. I've seen the pictures of Popeye. I've seen video of Popeye. I can't imagine what that was like as a kid to see that in front of your face. Because if people watching this or listening, Google Sideshow and Popeye, and you'll see these eyes popping out. I mean, almost coming right out of the whole socket.
Yeah.
It's an incredible visual.
Yeah. That's exactly what happened. I didn't know what I was going to see. The painting on the outside of the circus tent showed like the eyeballs hanging out with the muscles
like
or whatever. Yeah. So that's what was on the tent. And okay, all right. What actually happened versus what was on I would have rather have seen what was on the outside of the tent than to have that happen, because they just went, I don't even know how to explain. Whoop, out. And you don't realize how big eyeballs are.
I know, right?
I didn't know. And they just came right out, and they were the size of golf balls, and they were red, by the way. They weren't
I've got
white.
a thing too as a kid, and you're seeing Popeye. I mean, I'm sure you must be thinking too of the cartoon, like, oh, I love Popeye.
100%. That was the logo.
Yeah.
Mark, he was standing. I was in front of the stage. He bends down and looks at me. He's 2 feet away and does it. Yeah, right in my face. And I'm just looking. It was man, just scarred me for life.
Can I tell you another crazy act?
Yes.
So this is the cover of American Sideshow book I did 20 years ago, which is crazy to say. So this guy is Johnny Eck. And if anyone's here seen the movie Freaks from 1932, this is one of the stars. So legless man, he runs around on his hands. Amazing performer. This is his twin brother. And you can see he's full size. So what they did was they worked with a magician, and they would do the old sawing the person in half trick. So the magician would call up a volunteer from the audience, and that would be the full-size brother, Robert Eck. And so he would get up, he'd get into the box. The magician would, go through the routine, right? He sawing the box in half, pulls the box apart, just as everybody's seen on magic shows, right? It's a common trick. Puts the box back together, and then the man steps out and starts to return to his seat. But as he's walking off the stage, he splits in half, and the top half runs off this way, and the legs run off this way. And this was the 1930s, and people are passing out and screaming, freaking out, like, "Oh my God, what just happened?" And what would happen, obviously, is Robert would swap out with Johnny, and then they had a little person with pants pulled up over his head. Johnny would get on his shoulders, and they just jump off. But that's like, imagine seeing that live.
That's
in
that's
the
a good.
1930s.
That's good. That's good. That's
Yeah.
good.
They had to stop doing it because it was like too disturbing for people.
You would lose your mind because it's real.
Yeah.
That's not an illusion.
Yeah.
No, he's got no legs. So you would assume that you're looking at a body that was just sawed in half and is now running around.
It's like this weird mix of reality and the illusion that people are familiar with, and they bring it together. And just the fact that Johnny happened to have a twin brother. I mean, what are the odds, right? That you have this remarkable opportunity for a trick like that.
What happened to you? What happened to you? Yeah, how you've got to have an amazing backstory to suddenly steer into this. What happened?
So getting all this weird stuff you're saying.
Yeah, of course.
It all started from Sideshow. I mentioned growing up looking at the Robert Wildlow pictures and being amazed by that. The Elephant Man. I loved my favorite movie to this day is Time Bandits, with the band of little people stealing the map of time from God. And I've just always liked that kind of odd and unusual. And then meeting Johnny Fox at the Freakatorium, the Sword Swallower, just really got me going. And then I started meeting all these other performers. And I just got to know all these people and got into that community to be able to write American Sideshow. And it's all of those weird things that have branched out into everything else I've written, from the UFOs to Chasing Ghosts, Big Book of Mars, Oliver Cromwell's Embalmed Head. It's just that curiosity for the weird and the unusual. And I just, like you were saying with your show, you like to share the stuff you're into and bring that to other people. And, and hopefully they like it as much as you do. That's how I feel. I collect all these weird things and I love them and I dig into them and I just want to share them with people and find other people who like the weird stuff. That's why, it's great talking to you. You love all this weird stuff too. And that's what the books are. The books are like my collections of the weird things I found and want to tell people all about.
Throughout the 1800s and the turn of the century in the 1900s, everybody pretty much had a curiosity cabinet at their house.
Yeah.
I often wonder, where are they now? And where's all the stuff that was in them? Because that's what you would do. You would call up your neighbors, right? Let everybody know, okay, so check this out. We're going to have a dinner party at that. We just got a mummy from Egypt. Right? We just got a shrunken head from Africa, from South America. And it's going to be on the dining room table. So everybody come over on Friday. This was America, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's what developed in the museums. That's how I think it was the Peels in Baltimore that started off as basically a collection of this house and grew into the first museum. Yeah, that's where it all starts. And that's why I like the Sideshow performers back then. They would sell cabinet cards. So you get a photograph, mounted on a piece of cardboard, and people would put those in their cabinets of curiosities. Look who I saw. I saw the conjoined twins. I saw Chang and Eng, or the armless wonder, or the legless wonder, whoever it was. I have mine, it's just over here as my curiosity cabinet.
I think my memory, I saw one year a three-legged man.
Oh, Francisco Lentini.
I don't remember his name.
He had 4 feet too, and 2 penises.
Well, I didn't see those. But yeah,
that was him. Yeah, the third leg was like in the back. He would sit back on it like a stool.
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
bizarre. And
Yes.
now I thought it was fake until he
Yeah, no, he
moved
was
it. Oh
yeah.
yeah. Oh
He'd kick
yeah.
soccer balls to show how,
Yeah,
he's
yeah, yeah.
functional.
Yep, 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 yep,
Yeah,
yep,
he was
yep.
amazing. Yeah.
Oh, that I for
He
just
married
I
and
just
had kids, again, support his family. Yeah, he
two
did that.
penises. Two
Yeah.
penises.
Yeah, yeah. That the 4th foot was coming off that 3rd leg.
There's a really good joke in there, but this is a family show. But but which brings me to the point that most of these performers can't just function and hang out in normal society. It's you know what I mean? It's got to be a close-knit family. That's where they make their income. They're able to, live and eat and survive off of that. But who are you going to hang out with if you've got, three legs and 4 feet,
Right.
right?
Yeah, and that's why the Sideshow was such a healthy, I think. I mean, certainly there were some people who were exploited and there were some stories that weren't great, but for the most part, yes, this was a place for camaraderie. You could find other weird people. You could hang out with a guy with conjoined twin and the guy with no arms and the guy with a 3rd leg, and everybody's just sitting around playing cards and swapping stories and traveling and making money. And like I said, there's a story of another woman with a parasitic twin, Betty Lou Williams, who in the 1930s made so much money she supported all of her brothers and sisters and parents, multiple siblings, with the money she was making from the Sideshow. I mean, that wouldn't have happened otherwise. Her family was poor, so what else was she going to do? I have a book I put out, just a limited edition book called The Scrapbook of Agnes Schwarzenbacher, the Rubber Skin Lady. And shortly after the American Sideshow, her great niece contacted me, and I wanted to do this for years with her. She had a scrapbook, as the title would indicate, of the Rubber Skin Lady, who was her great aunt, that no one in the family wanted, and the family was ashamed of Agnes. She was basically, from the waist up, she was perfectly normal, but from the waist down, she had this rubbery skin. She could stretch out like about 16 inches. And it was just kind of would hang like loose and, like flappy and just bizarre looking. She covered up with a dress and she could be fine. But the family was ashamed of her. And so she left for a Sideshow, and she found love and she found friendship and she traveled, and she had this amazing scrapbook of all of her travels and the performers she worked with and behind the scenes photos of her with these other, human oddities. And it's just a remarkable, piece of history in this scrapbook. So during the early, the summer of 2020, when COVID was, its peak, I worked with this woman's husband, and he took all the photos, and we put together this book replicating the entire scrapbook and writing about all the different performers I could identify and how I came to meet this woman and, Agnes's life. So that's another example of just someone who was not really having any opportunities in life, but this was a place for her to have a life and to, do things she wouldn't have done otherwise.
The idea, I can always tie things back into ET, but here's the reason why I bring this up. We see things like different versions, different species, different types of ET, and people want to question that. That why aren't they more like us? And there's a point to that too, as well, to that argument, and I get that. But if ET were to come to this planet, the variations in just our own species is right there. Short, fat, tall, skin color, hair color. We have such a variety, and then you have the other stuff that's on the outside of that.
Yeah.
Why do we question, how many versions of ET there would be when just right here on this planet, just with us, there are so many different versions of us?
That's a good point. You're right. Just within humans and all the other species around us. I think that same way with like dogs. Dogs, I think, are more extreme in how many shapes and sizes and styles that we
Well,
have.
sort
That
of,
one
sort of,
particular
but
species.
look at you and look at me. We're two different species. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
We're completely different looking.
Yeah.
I mean, if you and I stepped off of a flying saucer on another planet, what would the baby Martian say when he ran home to his parents?
Well, there was, was it Fire in the Sky? There was some idea that like, okay, everyone has these pictures of what aliens look like from whatever sightings people say they've had, like the grays or whatever it may be. Who's to say that isn't like if we were traveling somewhere, if we were like, let's just say there's 5 of us, right? And we're different, skin color, different shape, type, whatever. We'd all have on the spacesuit and we look the same. Maybe one would be a little taller, a little bit wider, whatever. But we basically look the same because our spacesuits would be the same. So who's to say that whatever we're seeing or what people are believing they're seeing isn't some sort of spacesuit? And beneath it, maybe they are quite different. Who knows? These are all interesting things to think about. It's all fun conjecture.
If 10 of us took off our helmets, right?
We'd all be different.
Completely.
Yeah.
It's so funny because when, like, if you take the movie Arrival, I think it's such a really good example of that, where it's not 2 arms and 2 legs, right? It's 8 arms.
Yeah.
Right.
That's when we're looking at the handwriting. It was with Amy Adams.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, what's wrong with that?
I
Nothing.
like when they think of him as something different that's not so humanoid. It is weird that we just expect it to be humanoid in general, right?
Well, DNA. Here's my argument with that. Or if there was a debate, DNA is in everything that's living on this planet. Okay, so banana DNA and Marc Hartzman DNA pretty close to being the same. There's just little variations that make that a coconut and you, right?
Yeah.
Okay. But DNA is still universal. So when you get down to it, and the variations of living creatures are apparent, but the 2 arms, 2 legs, 2 eyes, 2, stereo, 2, there are things, opposable thumbs, right? There are things that make us very efficient. We just made the discovery on Bennu, all the fundamental amino acids that make up RNA and DNA, right?
Yeah.
So why wouldn't the efficiency of us be everywhere around the universe? And I think that's what Bennu shows us. So, yeah, it may be a gray, but it's still 2 arms and 2 legs.
Yeah. I would say, yeah, that's a good way to put it. It feels a little bit like Darwinism, right? Like survival of the fittest. This is what works, so that's what's thrived to achieve what we've achieved. But still, couldn't that DNA just tweak a little bit somewhere else and become that octopus-like thing that you were describing from Arrival?
Yeah.
Just could be a little bit, and now we're completely different.
3 legs, 2 penises.
That's there you go.
I mean, I'm just saying. But to that end, when we are making these discoveries every single day, not only about what's going on in the universe, but also into our distant past, it makes me wonder how much our planet has been visited. That's the thing. And could we just represent, are we actually ET? Right? Were we
That's
brought
quite
here?
possible, right?
Yeah.
I personally, I think there's a couple things. One is, I think the term is panspermia.
Yeah, panspermia.
Right. So who's to say that, like, yeah, something didn't kind of come through and drop off the ingredients for life, and that's where we came from somewhere else, right? That's because it is odd that we have intelligence and all these other creatures just don't, right? Like, I mean, dolphins have, or there's other creatures that do, but obviously not to the degree that we have. So that is a bit odd. I love the whole 2001, going back to Arthur C. Clarke. That 2001 model to me is pretty fascinating, that aliens, like you said, visited at some point and bestowed intelligence upon our particular species. And here we are working our way to getting back out into, the universe. It's a pretty interesting concept that,
And when we,
it's hard to buy into that one,
it's fascinating because when we used to question so much about what are the odds of more life being out there past planet Earth, right? And we would argue against that constantly, and give these ideas for the lack of life out there, right? That we would be, and I think that's a very cocky, egotistical way of thinking. But we have tried to stop life on this planet a lot, and you can't do it. Right? We've blown stuff up, we've burnt stuff down, asteroids. How many extinction events have we had on this planet? Like 5, 6, right? And life just starts up the next day again.
It keeps finding a way.
Yeah, you cannot stop life. We've tried. We've tried hard, So yeah, there must life is just got to be the same out there as it is here. You can't stop it. It's always trying to start.
And I mean, we've kind of been talking about the galaxy, but how many galaxies are there? Billions of galaxies, right? Which is, again, hard to even conceive, because just the distance within our own is so extraordinary. there's the problems within. We talk about the center of ours, but then there's so many other galaxies out there. We're sure there's plenty of opportunity, and who knows what that's like in a different galaxy. But again, is that distance ever traversable? Who knows? But
folding space, there's got to be, there's something interdimensional to it. There's something interdimensional. When Hubble did the first deep field imaging, right, back in the 80s, when that happened, our concept of the universe changed on that day, because we thought all those specks of light that we were looking at were stars. And then the Hubble deep field. So what they did, and you remember this, but for the audience, so NASA takes a chunk of the universe full of stars, and they find the blackest part, right? There's no light. And they focus on that and expose it for 2 weeks. Okay? And then they go and take a look at what they've got. And they blew it up. And what did they find? Galaxies. Forever.
Yeah.
Of light. So then they started blowing everything up. And all of those little specks of light were galaxies like the Milky Way. And the more that they blew it up, the more galaxies there were. It was like, oh. And that was, Mark,
we're so
that
tiny.
Was just a little tiny speck of space.
Yeah.
That was blown up. And so there's an interesting concept with that, to your point.
Yeah.
If you take a dime, okay, this is a guitar pick.
Okay.
You go out in your backyard with that. Okay, see that? You go out in your backyard, look up at the sky, and you hold this up at arm's length, right? You know what's inside of that?
Galaxies.
500,000 galaxies. Move it over. 500,000 more.
Yep.
And you can do that from any point on Earth. wrap your head around that.
You can't, right? It's
You
just it's hard
can't.
to conceive of
You
that
can't. You
space.
can't.
Yeah. That distance.
And
Those
we're
numbers.
alone. Yeah, we're alone. Yeah.
It's a depressing thought to think that I think it was Carl Sagan who said what a waste of space that would be if we were alone, right? Like all that and we're it. It's just all that stuff out there. There's nothing going on.
Well, what's a scarier thought?
What's
What's a scarier thought? We are alone or we are not.
That's a good question. They're both kind of scary in their own ways, right? I mean, I personally, it's if we are alone, we have a real responsibility to preserve ourselves, and I think
No,
that's
we
what's interesting
don't.
about-
If we are no. If we're alone, let's all become heroin addicts and listen to Pantera. There's nothing to live for, right? If you're alone, let's just burn this sucker down.
Well, you don't want to preserve intelligence in the universe?
No. I could give a crap. If we are not alone, that's why you preserve this planet. For the future and for making friends and for the people that want to visit, you know, you want to make sure your front room is vacuumed, right? No,
Yeah, well, and
but if we're
potential to
alone,
learn and yeah, I mean, to me, it's
if we're alone, let's burn up all the oil. Let's just screw it.
just go nuts.
There's no reason to live.
I'm not. I guess I don't really fear the idea of not being alone. I think it's much more exciting than scary to not be alone.
It would freak me out if it was announced that there is no life anywhere, that it's a dead universe. We are just a lucky roll of the dice, that we are all that there is. That's a sad day.
It's crazy to think that like that could be it, right?
Yeah, that's depressing. That's a reason to party. I mean, that's a reason. Let's just, we need to have hope, you know, and to want to make friends and meet what is out there and wonder about it and make friends, you know, with the rest of the, that we need that. We don't need the opposite of that.
That idea of hope is just another one of those innate parts of being human, right? I think that's why people want to believe in life after death as well. You know, that we exist in some way, that there's some spiritual realm that we exist in. Just again, I wrote about that in Chasing Ghosts. Like, I'd rather believe that there's something rather than nothing. So you kind of have to have that hope. I think that serves us well in all different ways. You want to think that we're not it, and that this isn't it.
Exactly. If it was okay, let's say this. Let's say we get a message from deep space, that 100 light year away star, right, that we were talking about earlier, right? And they write us and they send us a message going, okay, so check this out. We can't get there yet. And we know that you can't get here yet. But let's start working on this together. Let's build some ships and let's meet in the middle. That's a reason to join this planet together.
Yeah, that's true.
Right? All of all those differences, all that craziness, that's forgotten. We now have a common goal where we want to, it's like, you know, traveling across the ocean to the other country, right? You have a reason to build a ship to go over and see what's there and make friends. How cool would that be? Oh, that would just be amazing.
That sounds like, it's been a few years since I read, but Andy Weir's Project Hail Mary was a little bit of that, right? We had I forgot what the exact event was that he created, but there was a reason for Earth to work together and send someone out into space, and another creature from another planet came, and they end up meeting in space trying to, you know, achieve the same goals to save their planet. So it's a nice idea. I mean, this goes back to, you played the clip at the beginning of your show from Reagan, talking about an alien race coming here would be the one thing that would bring us all together and make us stop fighting each other, we're forced to work together to, save ourselves in one way or another.
I found that always to be such a profound message.
Yeah. True.
A lot of people think he just gave that speech once. He didn't. He gave it like 9 or 10 times. And his speechwriter kept taking it out of his speech.
Yeah.
So Ronald would write it into the margin, right? And he would go out and but he did that multiple times. And it was a very positive message.
Yeah.
And I think it's the correct one. The inevitable thing about this planet is that our sun is going to die out. And before it dies out, and some say it'll be about 5 billion years, that it's halfway through its life cycle now. But before it gets to that point, very early on, it's going to become unstable. Once it burns out its hydrogen core and that switches to helium, and right now it burns at 10 million degrees, but helium is 100 million degrees. So when that happens, gravity, and the sun's going to shrink and expand, and we have to be gone. We can't be here when that happens.
Yeah.
We can't. That's a bad day at Black Rock. Trust me. And because when that instability happens, our atmosphere gets blown away. All the water on this planet just evaporates. It's going to be at 2,000 degrees, surface temperature. The sun is going to take up the entire sky. It's not going to be this big. It's going to expand, and we have to be gone.
Yeah.
We can't. We have no. We are long gone. Most of the solar system is not going to survive.
We'll be gone.
Yeah. And so ET would be doing the same thing. They have the same unstable situation that they have to deal with. And eventually you just got to find a better place to live. Kind of like Three Body Problem, the TV series. Did you see that?
I did. Yeah. Yeah.
Same situation, right?
Yeah.
They've got an how many times does the civilization there restart? It's hundreds and hundreds of times, right? Because of the instability of 3 stars and the unpredictability of it. And they needed a stable situation. And what do? We reach out and they find out, hey, Earth's pretty cool.
There's a place.
Yeah, there's a spot, man.
Yep.
So yeah, there's no reason to think that ET wouldn't be out there looking for something better than what that they had to leave. Why? We're going to have to do the same thing.
Yeah.
The exact same thing. So there you go.
Well,
Mark, where can everybody go and find your stuff? I do have your books website up. Where else can everybody chase you down?
Yeah, so you can check that site, markhartzmanbooks.com. I've also got a site, weirdhistorian.com, where I have all kinds of weird history, as the site would tell you. It runs quite a range of weird history stories. I also run a site called Curious Publications with a bunch of weird old public domain books I bring back to life from late 1800s, early 1900s. And you can find me on social media. I'm pretty easy to find at Marc Hartzman on Instagram or other sites. It's pretty much just my name or Weird Historian, either one of those.
And where can everybody get the new book?
Yeah, so To the Hilt, you can find pretty much wherever you buy books online at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Books A Million. Any place you buy online, you'll find it. It's a beautiful, as you saw, beautiful big hardcover book, full color images, tons of images people haven't seen in decades. Some of them I think never published before. So we're really pleased with what we put together. It's a pretty incredible book.
Thank you so much, my friend. I look forward to our next conversation, man. You're the absolute very best.
Thanks so much, Jimmy.
Thank you, Mark. Marc Hartzman, everybody. Now, weirdhistorian.com and markhartzmanbooks.com. The links are below throughout social media and over on our website. All right. So I'll see everybody tomorrow night. Until then, go Beckley Teppy. Fade to Black is produced by Hilton J. Palm, Renee Newman, and Michelle Freed. Special thanks to Bill, John, Dex, Jessica, Dennis, and Kevin. Webmaster is Drew the Geek. Music by Doug Aldrich. Intro, Space Boy. Fade to Black is produced by KJCR for the Game Changer Network. This broadcast is owned and copyrighted 2024 by Fade to Black and the Game Changer Network, Inc. It cannot be rebroadcast, downloaded, copied, or used anywhere in the known universe without written permission from Fade to Black or the Game Changer Network. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Go back, Lee Tappy.